All right, psychology. We are diving back into it today and actually switching gears a little bit. We are done with intelligence and now we are moving back to psychological disorders. And I got some weird ones for you today. These are actually very rare disorders. They're not diagnosed very frequently, but these are some of the more confounding ones. Like, we don't know how these symptoms happen. We don't know how these disorders happen. In a lot of ways, they're unexplainable. So they're kind of interesting to study. And you're going to, hear some today that you've probably heard of before, but then you're going to hear some that you have not heard of before. So let's dive right into it. Basically, I want to talk about two categories of disorders. Once again, remember the DSM-5, that Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, is kind of the Bible when it comes to diagnosing psychological disorders. They have all the diagnostic criteria is in there, and two different sections in that book are two that we're talking about today: somatic symptom disorders, and then also dissociative disorders. Okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to start with somatic symptom disorders, and this is actually underwent quite a few changes with the DSM over the past couple revisions of that book, because once again, they're just so hard to explain. So a somatic symptom disorder is a category of disorders. There's actually a couple specific ones we're going to talk about under this umbrella, but a somatic symptom disorder is somatic, which means body. So you're seeing these symptoms or these criteria manifest itself in the body. So sometimes you're going to see people who have temporary blindness. Sometimes you'll see people who are suffering some kind of physical symptoms that can't be explained medically, which is really weird. Like, if they have temporary blindness, they do some checkups on their eyes. They do some checkups on their occipital lobe, which is kind of the part of the brain that controls the visual cortex. And there's nothing wrong, and we can't find any reason that they would experience this blindness. And this dates all the way back to the Freud days, right? Like, Freud would explain that these are disorders that are, unexplainable. Like, you can't explain why they happen. It's in the unconscious mind, or it's in, some recesses of our brain that we can't even pinpoint. So here's what a somatic symptom disorder might look like. First off, let's talk about conversion disorders, which is one type. A conversion disorder is when you have loss of a specific body function with no cause. Like, we don't know why they have lost that specific body function. There's a few different ones that are common when it comes to how they are diagnosed. One is loss of some kind of sense, right? So vision, like I mentioned earlier, hearing, smell and taste sometimes even. Somebody who has temporary blindness or temporary deafness with no medical reason that they should be having those symptoms. Another one is paralysis, actually. People experiencing temporary paralysis, like not being able to use their legs or arms, and there's really no reason. There's no damage to the spinal cord. There's no reason that they should be, paralyzed, but they feel like they are, and they literally cannot move their muscles. Conversion disorders are very, very rare, but also very, very confusing to us. We don't know how exactly to define them. I got a lot of videos for you today. I'm going to show you some videos that maybe you've seen before, and then I'm also going to post a lot of other videos in our supplemental video page in this module. So you guys can look at them if you want to, but you don't have to. And I'll kind of maybe show you a couple of those actually on the presentation. The other type of somatic symptom disorder that we're going to talk about is one that you may have heard of called hypochondria, but in the last update of the DSM-5, they changed the name of it because people did not like to be called hypochondriacs, because hypochondriac almost turned into like a derogatory term for somebody that thinks they're sick all the time when they actually have no sickness. So when somebody was actually diagnosed by a psychiatrist with hypochondria, it kind of hurt the patient-client relationship, because they're like, oh, you just think I'm making all this up. Well, no, that's not what hypochondria is, and it got into all this big discussion. So we just changed the name. It's the exact same disorder. It's the exact same diagnostic criteria, but now we call it illness anxiety disorder. So illness anxiety disorder is actually a somatic symptom disorder. It's not an anxiety disorder. So an illness anxiety disorder is basically, when people have sicknesses or overblow their sicknesses or symptoms when there's no apparent, physical cause of them, having that symptom, so somebody that thinks that they are, sick, and they actually might even have some body reactions to being sick, like a fever or something like that, but they're not sick. I'm sure there is a lot of this going around right now with COVID-19, because with COVID-19, you have so many people going into the emergency room saying that they think they have the symptoms, and it's based out of anxiety. That's why they call it illness anxiety disorder. It's not based on any facts. They just like have this fear that they are sick, and they go in and get checked out, and they're actually not. So let me give you a couple examples of this. Let's go conversion disorder first. Here's my first video I got for you for conversion disorder. This is from a great show called Band of Brothers, and it's a military example. And this guy has just been in a battle where they got blindsided. They got ambushed. And this particular guy was in the heaviest fighting and saw a couple of his comrades killed on either side of him. And when he gets back to the medic tent, he basically says he can't see. He says, I'm blind. I can't see. And they check him out, and there's no medical reason, there's no physical reason he shouldn't be able to see. But, as Freud would explain this is typical conversion disorder. It is his mind that has shut off his vision because it was so damaging. It was something that he could not handle, that, his brain just said, we're not going to allow you to see this, and shut down his vision. And in this clip right now, I'm not sure how accurate this would be, but after he gets this talk from his commanding officer saying basically, Bly, that's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done to stop this. It's not your fault. The blindness goes away and he can see again. And sometimes that's all it takes, because it is this thing in your mind. And once you resolve it, the temporary blindness might go away. So here's one example. This is conversion disorder.
See. You can't see? So he says. Blythe? It's Lieutenant Winters. What happened?
It just kind of went black on me.
You can't see?
I think so. I can't see a thing.
Well, you just take it easy, Blythe. I'm gonna get you out of here. Get you back to England. It's gonna be okay.
Sir. I didn't want to let anyone down.
Just take it easy. Okay, son.
Sir.
Yeah, what is it?
Thank you, sir. I'm okay. I'm okay. I think I'm okay.
You can see?
I don't know what happened. I think I'm okay.
Okay, so that example right there from Band of Brothers, probably a very accurate representation of what we're talking about with conversion disorder. He had the temporary blindness. There was no reason that he should be blind. It's what we call psychosomatic, the mind affecting the body, psycho, mind, somatic, body. And once that internal conflict in his mind was resolved, that he was not at fault, his vision returned. So this next example, probably not the most accurate one, but I thought you might enjoy it. I definitely enjoy it. Another example of a possible conversion disorder. This is from Talladega Nights. If you guys have seen that movie before, Ricky Bobby believes he's paralyzed. He had a car wreck that was very traumatic, and he believes he's paralyzed, but the doctors say he is not paralyzed. He just got some things to work out in his head, which is actually pretty close to what we're talking about here with conversion disorder. So thought you guys might enjoy this clip. Here you go.
Psychosomatic. But we all need to go along with this because he's in a delicate state. So when you say psychosomatic, you mean like he could start a fire with his thoughts?
No, not at all. It means it's all in his mind.
I'm just saying, sometimes you get a knock on the head, you get special powers. It happens all the time. Read a comic book, okay?
Everyone's real friendly. I mean, it doesn't hurt being Ricky Bobby. I'm not gonna lie to you.
So how's the physical therapy going?
Oh, I gave that up. Yeah, I gave that up after maybe the first day. Within the first hour, I gave that up. I'm through lying to myself, you know. It's time to be mature about this and just face facts. I bought myself a $100,000 handicap accessible van with the captain's chairs and the DVD plasma screens in the back for the
You all
kids.
paid up on that?
Oh, yeah, that's all paid in full. It's parked out there. And then the next thing I got to do is I just got to have a sit down with Carly and just let her know that it's okay for her to seek the comfort of other men. Because, you know, she's got to run wild. You can't keep something like that back.
Hold on, man. Hold. We got to tell him. No, I don't care what the doctor said. We got to tell him now.
Ricky, the doctor told us that we should let you work it out in your own sweet time, but Ricky, you can walk.
What'd you just say?
He's telling you the truth, man. It's all in your head.
You sick. I mean, you walk in that door on your two legs all fat and cocky and looking at me in my chair, and you tell me it's all in my head? I hope that both of you have sons, handsome, beautiful, articulate sons who are talented and star athletes, and they have their legs taken away. I mean, I pray you know that pain and that hurt.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby! Don't you put that on us! You are not paralyzed!
I am so paralyzed.
No!
Rough on him now.
No, he needs to know.
Okay.
He's always crying.
Tough love it is. Tough love. Wake up, idiot.
You want to know what I am? You want to see what my life is?
Don't do it.
You want to see what's going on here?
Don't you stick that knife in your leg.
Oh, man! Ow!
Well, hold on.
Oh, man!
Hold on now. Hold on.
Oh, that hurt.
Walk it off.
Oh, my!
Walk it off.
Ow!
Stretch.
Ah!
Hey, man. You can walk. You can walk.
I walk.
You can walk.
All right, so maybe not the most realistic example, but one that you guys might remember from that movie. But it is still conversion disorder. It's a loss of function in the body, but there's no physical reason for that function to be lost. So I got a couple other clips here. I'm not going to show you guys these on the PowerPoint here, but you guys can check these out. A couple Parks and Recreation clips from illness anxiety disorder, basically thinking that he's way more injured or way more sick than he is. Kind of a comedic example. And then there's actually a good example here that I'll post as well. This is from a Woody Allen movie where he actually does have very typical, very realistic hypochondriac symptoms. We now call that illness anxiety disorder, like I said. But it's a great illustration of that disorder. So let's move and switch gears into dissociative disorders. This one might be one that you're familiar with from dissociative identity disorder. Okay, some people used to call this multiple personality disorders, but we thought that was misleading. It's not a personality disorder. It's actually a dissociative disorder. So we renamed it dissociative identity disorder a long, long time ago. But people still sometimes call it multiple personality disorder. Some of you guys may have seen the movie Split. Okay, Split does a fairly good job of showing dissociative identity disorder symptoms through the first half of the movie. Then it goes off the walls. He starts climbing, walls and, doing crazy stuff, turns into a monster, whatever. Like, that's not realistic, obviously. But beginning of that movie, it actually shows pretty good, accurate dissociative identity disorder symptoms. So let's dive into what dissociative disorders are. Dissociative disorders are an alteration in memory, identity, or consciousness. So those are the big three. If you see an alteration in memory, a person doesn't remember something that they should remember, they have blackouts, they have lost time, whatever. Identity, they feel like they take on another identity or they lose their sense of identity. Or consciousness, they black out and lose consciousness. They black out and an alter or another personality state. An altered personality state takes over their consciousness. That would be what we're talking about with dissociative disorders, okay? One example is a fugue state. Dissociative fugue is actually a modifier with dissociative disorders. So you could have dissociative fugue without having dissociative identity disorder. Now, here's what dissociative fugue is. Fugue is when a person all of a sudden loses a complete sense of who they are. They lose their identity, okay? And they maybe even leave their family. They leave their hometown. They kind of go off and maybe even sometimes start up a new life, form a new identity, start up a new family. I mean, it's crazy stuff. Now, I know this is very rare. I know you don't hear about this stuff too much outside of fictional movies and books. But I'm going to post this video as well in the supplemental videos if you guys want to take a look. This is a crazy example of a real dissociative fugue state where this guy one day goes off to visit his parents and he's never heard from again for the next like 3 months. And then he winds up in, a different state and comes to on the streets of, I think, like Salt Lake City or something like that, Denver maybe, and he is picked up by authorities, and he tells them, like, I don't know who I am, I have no identification, I have no idea where I came from, and they think he's lying, right? They think he's just, trying to get out of, being arrested or, a crime or a homelessness or whatever, and they don't believe him. Well, the Today Show actually picked up his story and started airing, this guy's face and said, hey, if you know this person, he doesn't know himself. If you know this person, please call in. Somebody calls in from Washington. Remember, he's in like Utah or Colorado or something. Somebody calls in from Washington and says, yeah, I know him. He's been missing for 3 months. So a crazy example of dissociative fugue. If you got time, watch it. It's just a short clip.
Amazing.
It's very interesting. Okay. And then here's the one that most people will talk about when it goes to dissociative disorders. Dissociative identity disorder. Used to be called multiple personality disorder. It is this disruption in identity. Sometimes people have 2 or maybe even more alter personality states with very different characteristics, right? A normal person might be very laid back and very, calm, and their altered state that takes over during these dissociative identity episodes may be very vulgar and very aggressive, and the exact opposite of the actual person who is suffering from this disorder. So, the main personality has alters that are a lot of times very different from their main personality state. It's a very controversial disorder. I don't want to, paint it in a light that's, not true. But I'm just going to say that psychiatrists and psychologists and everybody that studies dissociative disorders are very split on this dissociative identity disorder diagnosis and whether it is misdiagnosed sometimes, overdiagnosed. Just a lot of controversy that surrounds it. But it is a gap in memory. It's not ordinary just forgetting. It is actually where an alternate personality state takes over your main consciousness and comes out where people can actually see a different identity. A great example that I came up with was Herschel Walker, which you guys may recognize that name. He was a professional football player in the NFL for several years, one of the greatest college football players of all time. And once his playing days were over, he was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, and he shares his story in a short video that, once again, I'll put in the supplemental videos. So, that is it for today. Those are your dissociative disorders, specifically dissociative identity disorder. And you guys got a short 5-question quiz to take, and that is it.